Here we are at the Georgia State Capitol building in Atlanta, Georgia. This is the building where Congress meets to decide the laws of the state of Georgia. It's because our United States system splits power between the state level and the federal level. It's called federalism. Today we're going to talk about types of governance. I'm Mr. Coulter, and this is Human Geography. As we learned this unit about states and the boundaries that divide them, now we want to focus on the governance that happens inside of those states. So today we are focusing on 7.4 forms of governance. And there are two major forms that we're going to discuss. The two forms are unitary systems and federal systems of governance. So unitary systems are when you have one centralized power in a state versus federal, where you have multiple different smaller forms of government under one larger one. So it's the larger central government shares power with smaller governments. So the unitary states started as the early European states were all unitary because they were under a monarchy and they were based in one capital city. So we thought of our example earlier of the absolute ruler of Louis XIV. He was in Paris. He built a spectacular palace at Versailles, and they gathered power towards themselves so that they would be the focal point of the government. That's that early unitary state where there was one central power. Federal states came about in the New World, in the colonies. So in the Americas, where you had these spread out, diverse, large countries, they needed a central government that could make some decisions, but leave a lot of the choices and power up to the smaller local governments. We want to compare the federal and unitary systems of government. So you can see on the left, we have the federal system, and on the right, we have the unitary system. On the left, we have a United States flag to represent that the U.S. is a federal system, where on the right, we have France's flag because they are a unitary system. So a federal system is one that divides power between the national and local forms of government, where the unitary system is composed of one central government that holds all the power. In a federal system, power may be diffused out to the smaller branches of government. But in a unitary system, very little political power exists outside of the central government. So most of the power exists just in the central government. In a federal system, states or provinces are given considerable self-rule, usually through their own legislatures. So in the United States, each of the individual states has their own legislature and governor who is able to make decisions that are left up to them by the federal government. In a unitary government, there's a standardization of laws. So all the laws are the same and they're implemented across the country. So that's why in states, we have different laws for different states. So like the age that people get their learner's permit or tax policies, different states have the ability to make different choices. And when there's conflicts between the two governments, that change comes slowly, but abuse is more easily prevented. So sometimes you have conflicts between different states, and sometimes it's hard to change things, but typically it's easier to hold people accountable because of the power being diffused between multiple states. Where in a unitary government, things can change quickly, but if somebody at the top is abusing power, it's really hard to hold them accountable. So in a unitary system, things can change quickly and be implemented across a country, but it's hard to hold people accountable at the top. So this is a map of the world based on unitary and federal states. I want you to try to decide if green is unitary or federal, and then same thing for blue. So pause the video for a second. I want you to decide which one you think is federal and unitary. So once you've made your choice, you may have figured out that because the United States is a federal system, that the green represents countries that have federal systems, and that the blue represents unitary systems. So what I'd like you to do now is write down 3 observations of things that stand out to you. Maybe whole regions that stand out as federal systems or unitary systems. Maybe there are some countries that you're surprised are large and are still unitary systems, or countries that are small that are federal systems. So write down 3 observations that stand out to you. Things that stand out to me that are surprising on the map or that stand out is that the majority of Europe are all still unitary states. We see Germany and a couple of the countries south of Germany are federal, but for the most part, most are unitary states. Russia is a federal state because of its large, diverse spread. We also see that India, because of its diversity, has multiple states. Brazil is another one, like Argentina, that was a New World Federalist state. And then we see a lot of unitary states in Africa, even when they're really large countries. Also, China, which has the biggest population in the world and is a very large country, is still a unitary state. Unitary states often have one extremely large city that is the cultural hearth of the country. So they have one large city that dominates the culture and also the economic structure of the country. It is at least twice as big as the next biggest city. And when a country has that, that is called a primate city. So a primate city is one that dominates the economic and culture of the country, and then also is at least twice as big as the next biggest city. This is often the case in unitary states, where you have the government based in the capital, and it's also a primate city. So a great example of this is London in the United Kingdom. So London has the government base there for the UK. It is also thought of as the cultural capital of the United Kingdom and is the financial capital as well. Paris is similar. Some major examples of unitary states in the world are Japan, China, and Turkey. They are world powers that are unitary states. So we can see here we've got our primate cities of London and Paris, which are both found in unitary states. And then Japan and China in East Asia are both unitary states with pretty different physical geographies. China is much more spread out, but because of the Communist Party, is still a unitary state. And then that brings us to federal states. So federal states are generally much more spread out than unitary states. Sometimes federal states have to end up moving their capital to try to unite their people, or they might be doing it to try to move people inland. This is called a forward thrust capital, where after you have an established country, you move your capital in order to either bring people together or get people to move into other parts of the country. So Brasilia is a great example of this. Brazil moved its capital from the coast inland to Brasilia because they realized that those two major cities on the coast saw major overcrowding and they wanted to pull people inland. Brazil actually moved their capital far inland to Brasilia to try to draw people away from the coast and to inhabit the rainforest. Another reason you might move your capital is to try to make people feel more united. So Nigeria moved its capital to Abuja. So it used to be Lagos, which was the major trade port and still is. And they moved to Abuja to try to unite the people who felt left out of power in the north and the east part of the country. So they have so many different languages spoken and ethnicities in Nigeria that they wanted to try to bring people together, so they moved it to a neutral middle site to try to unite Nigeria around this new capital. Some of the major examples around the world of federal states are the United States, India, and Germany. Here we can see that when you make a forward thrust capital, when you have the option to redesign it the way that you want, you can see that you can do a lot of things like we did in DC, where you can design the city to reflect what you want it to. So like how we have the mall with all the monuments around it and how they go up to important government buildings. This is on the left, Brasilia, and the designs that they chose to do when they made it. You can see it's very clearly planned and laid out. And on the right, you have Abuja in Nigeria. And here we have two very prominent federal states. On the left, you have India and the different states that make it up. You can see that they split up with different capitals, and they have a lot of very populated cities spread throughout. We also have on the right, Germany and the different federal states of Germany. This is a map in German from 2007. So those two major forms of governance that we talked about are unitary and federal states. And different countries split up or pull together based on what they need. So we have benefits of unitary states of you're more connected, laws go out immediately, and people have that connection to know where the capital is and where all the power resides. But a lot of times that power being in one place can lead to corruption or abuses of power or people being ignored. Where in a federal state, things don't move as quickly, but different states have the power to meet the needs of the people who live in those states. And so we see that in those states, you can hold power more accountable when they're on a more local level. So we have to weigh the pluses and minuses of each system for the country that it works for. That's just one step in us better understanding our world. I'm Mr. Coulter, and that was Human Geography.